You attract what your standards allow. Not what you hope for, not what you wish for, not what you daydream about when life gets quiet. You attract what you tolerate, what you accept, and what you repeatedly settle for. Every outcome in your life, your relationships, your health, your finances, your confidence, your discipline, is shaped by the invisible thermostat called your standards. And here's the truth most people never face. Your standards are deciding your destiny long before your dreams ever get a vote. Think about it. When someone says, I want to be healthier, but they allow themselves to hit snooze 10 times, what happens? Their standard of comfort beats their desire for change. When someone says, I want to be financially free, but they allow themselves to make excuses instead of decisions, what happens? Their standard of procrastination beats their ambition. And when someone says, I want better relationships, but they continue accepting disrespect, inconsistency, and low effort, what happens? Their standard of what they allow becomes the blueprint for what they receive. Your life is a mirror of the standards you've set and the ones you've refused to set. The moment you raise your standards, everything changes. Not because the world suddenly gets easier, but because you get stronger. You become someone who refuses to settle for average effort, average intentions, average habits, and average outcomes. You become someone who demands more from yourself than anyone else could ever demand of you. Raising your standards isn't about perfection. It's about identity. It's about declaring who you will no longer be and stepping into who you were always meant to become. Because once you decide, truly decide, that certain behaviors are beneath you, that certain patterns are no longer acceptable, that certain excuses are no longer valid, you transform. Let me tell you something powerful. Your standards change the moment your pain hits a threshold. Human beings don't change when things are okay. They change when okay becomes unbearable. They change when they say, I refuse to live like this anymore. That moment, that line in the sand, is the birth of a new life. Maybe you've been tolerating average. Maybe you've been tolerating inconsistency. Maybe you've been tolerating people who drain you, habits that weaken you, thoughts that cage you. And as long as you tolerate it, it stays. You attract what your standards allow. You want better? Raise them. You want stronger? Raise them. You want more? Raise them. Raise the standard of what you expect from yourself in the morning. Raise the standard of how you talk to yourself when no one's listening. Raise the standard of how you show up when no one is watching. Because character isn't built in front of an audience. It's built in silence, in discipline, in the moments where no one will ever applaud you. And let's be brutally honest, your current life is not a reflection of your potential. It's a reflection of your standards. Some of you have dreams that your standards simply cannot support. Dreams of greatness sitting on foundations of inconsistency. Dreams of abundance sitting on foundations of procrastination. Dreams of breakthrough sitting on foundations of hesitation. You can't build a skyscraper on a foundation built for a tent. If you want your life to rise, your standards must rise first. So ask yourself, what am I tolerating that is keeping me small? What habits am I allowing that are stealing my energy? What patterns am I repeating that sabotage my future? Who in my life is matching the standards I claim to have, and who is violating them? What excuses have I allowed to become part of my identity? Because raising your standards isn't just about adding things. It's about eliminating things. It's about removing the people, the behaviors, the stories, and the distractions that dilute your power. When you raise your standards, you also raise the price of admission into your life. People will treat you according to the standards you communicate. Life will reward you according to the standards you embody. Success will meet you at the level of the standards you refuse to compromise. And listen carefully, raising your standards is not an event. It's a daily decision, a repeated commitment, a contract you sign with yourself every single day, especially on the days you don't feel like it, especially on the days when the old you tries to come back because the old you is comfortable, the old you is familiar, the old you is safe, but the old you cannot take you to the future you want. You must decide which version of you is in charge. The version that settles, or the version that rises, the version that waits, or the version that acts, the version that blames, or the version that builds, the version that accepts anything, or the version that accepts only excellence. Raising your standards isn't just about doing more, it's about becoming someone whose very presence demands more from yourself, from your environment, from your life. When you raise your standards, your energy changes. your posture changes, your decisions change, your circle changes, your destiny changes. People often ask, how do I attract better opportunities? The answer is simple. Become someone who is capable of holding them. Raise your standards around discipline so you can maintain success. Raise your standards around effort so you can multiply success. Raise your standards around mindset so you can sustain success. Raise your standards around self-worth so you can receive success. Because you don't rise to your goals, you rise to your standards. Every breakthrough in your life will come after a moment where you finally decide that your old standard is no longer acceptable, that your old patterns are no longer acceptable, that your old identity is no longer acceptable. Transformation begins with one sentence. I deserve more and I will no longer tolerate less. That's the moment your life begins to shift. That's the moment the universe rearranges. That's the moment opportunities begin to find you, not because you are lucky, but because you've aligned with a higher version of yourself. You attract what your standards allow. Raise them and watch what rises with them. Your life rises or falls to the level of your standards, not your goals. That is a statement most people fail to understand, yet it is one of the most powerful truths about success, fulfillment, and growth. Many people go through life setting goals, writing them down, imagining themselves achieving them, hoping that someday, somehow, they will reach them. They say things like, I want to earn more money. I want to get in shape. I want to find a better relationship. I want to travel. I want to learn. I want to achieve. And yet, despite all their hopes and plans, most of them never get there. Why? Because goals alone don't shape your life. Goals are dreams without discipline, wishes without standards, and intentions without the foundation to support them. The reality is simple. Your life reflects your standards, not your wishes, not your vision boards, not your fleeting bursts of motivation. Your life reflects what you have decided is acceptable to you. What you tolerate, what you refuse to improve, what you let slide, what you consistently allow into your world. These are the true architects of your destiny. If you want to understand this on a deep level, think about your own life. Take a moment and honestly reflect. Look at your health, your relationships, your finances, your habits, your mindset. Every area has a standard you are either consciously or unconsciously enforcing. If your health is average, it is because the standard you set for yourself around exercise, nutrition, rest, and discipline is average. If your relationships are unfulfilling, it is because the standard you hold for how people treat you, how you treat yourself, and how much love and respect you demand is low. If your finances are stagnant, it is because the standard you hold for managing money, investing in yourself, learning, and taking risks is insufficient. Everything you see around you, everything you have or don't have, everything you are proud of or frustrated by is the result of the invisible measure of standards you have allowed yourself to accept. Now, let me be clear. Raising your standards is not just about doing more, it's about being more. It's not about pushing harder while holding the same identity. It's about evolving into someone who simply cannot tolerate what they used to tolerate. It's about saying no to mediocrity in every form, about rejecting compromise when it conflicts with your potential. You see, goals are temporary markers. They can inspire you for a moment, but they do not change the container, the person who must do the work, sustain the effort, and navigate the challenges of life. Standards, on the other hand, define the container. Standards define who you are when no one is watching, who you are under pressure, who you are when life tests you. Standards define your identity, and identity is the ultimate engine of consistent action and lasting results. Think about the people you admire most, the ones who consistently achieve, who maintain excellence, who rise above the crowd. Did they achieve that because they had lofty goals? Goals are temporary. Anyone can set them. They achieved it because they refused to settle for anything less than a specific standard of excellence in every part of their life. They refused to compromise when it mattered. They demanded more of themselves than anyone else could demand. They did not allow excuses, distractions, or comfort to lower the bar. Every choice they made, every action they took aligned with the level of standard they were unwilling to compromise. And that is why they attract results that most people only dream about. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone who says, I want to be fit, but they allow themselves to eat poorly, skip workouts, sleep irregularly, and ignore the habits that create a strong, healthy body. What will they get? Maybe occasional bursts of effort, maybe temporary results, but not the lasting transformation they desire. Why? Because their standards for their body are too low. They are tolerating habits that do not support the outcome they claim to want. On the other hand, someone who raises their standard, who refuses to compromise on nutrition, exercise, rest, and consistency, that person transforms. Their life rises because their standards demand it. Goals are achieved as a byproduct of the standard they live by. The same principle applies to every area of life: relationships, finances, personal growth, mindset, contribution. Most people live below their potential, not because they lack ability, intelligence, or opportunity, but because their standards are too low. They accept mediocrity in themselves and others. They rationalize bad habits, toxic relationships, and limiting beliefs. They convince themselves that good enough is acceptable when deep down they know it is not. And this invisible surrender of standards keeps them trapped in cycles of frustration, unfulfilled potential, and regret. Goals may motivate them temporarily, but without standards, goals fade and the old patterns take over. Here's the secret most people never learn. Raising your standards requires courage, awareness, and consistency. It requires facing the truth about yourself and your life. The things you have tolerated, the excuses you have told yourself, the compromises you have made. It requires asking tough questions. What am I allowing that is keeping me small? What am I tolerating that is holding me back? What habits, relationships, or beliefs have I accepted that sabotage my progress? And most importantly, am I willing to refuse them, even if it is uncomfortable, even if it challenges my current identity, even if it isolates me from the familiar? Because standards are not just about doing more, they are about being unwilling to do less. Raising your standards also means raising your expectations of yourself. It means refusing to be controlled by fear, laziness, or convenience. It means demanding excellence in thought, action, and character. It means showing up as the version of yourself capable of achieving your goals, not just occasionally, but consistently. Life responds to the identity you inhabit. If you inhabit the identity of someone who is disciplined, committed, and resilient, life meets you with opportunities, alignment, and results. If you inhabit the identity of someone who tolerates inconsistency, distraction, and excuses, life mirrors that back to you. Another critical point is that raising standards is contagious. The people around you, the environments you immerse yourself in, the culture you adopt, all of these are influenced by the standards you live by. When you raise your standards, you influence your surroundings. People will treat you according to the level you communicate with your actions, not your words. If you demand more from yourself, others will begin to expect more from you. If you refuse to accept disrespect, laziness, or mediocrity, your environment will shift to reflect that. Standards are a magnet. They attract the conditions, people, and opportunities that match them. Now, understand that raising your standards is not a one-time event. It is a daily repeated choice. Every day presents a new opportunity to live above your old habits, your old identity, and your old excuses. Every day is a test. Will you act according to the standards you aspire to, or will you slip back into what is comfortable, convenient, and familiar? Your life is the sum of those choices. Those who consistently choose higher standards rise, while those who consistently choose compromise stagnate. Your goals are important, but they are secondary. They are milestones, markers, signals of direction. Your standards are the foundation, the engine, the force that determines whether those milestones are ever reached. Without high standards, goals remain dreams. With high standards, goals become inevitable outcomes of the person you have become. So the question is, what standards are you living by today? Are they enough to create the life you desire, or have you been tolerating too much, compromising too often, and settling too quietly? Because here is a truth few people want to admit. Your results today are not random. They are the logical outcome of the standards you have chosen, consciously or unconsciously. And the good news is that you can choose differently at any moment. You can raise your standards, and when you do, your life begins to rise. Every aspect of your life, every area you care about, every goal you have, every dream you hold, it is all waiting for you to raise the bar. Not by wishing, not by hoping, not by wanting, but by refusing to accept anything less than the standard that aligns with the life you are capable of creating. Standards are the bridge between who you are now and who you were meant to become. Standards are the engine that turns intention into action, dreams into reality, and potential into results. Raise your standards in your habits. Raise your standards in your relationships. Raise your standards in your health. Raise your standards in your finances. Raise your standards in your thinking. Raise your standards in your character. Raise your standards in your contribution. Because your life will rise to meet the level of standard you enforce. not your goals, not your hopes, not your plans. Your standards are the invisible architecture of your destiny. And the moment you decide to live by higher standards, your life begins to rise in ways you could never achieve by goals alone. You attract what you tolerate, so eliminate anything that lowers your identity. Every single person, every environment, every habit, every thought, every relationship in your life contributes to your sense of self, your identity. And here is a truth most people never fully confront. If something in your life doesn't serve you, if something in your life diminishes your confidence, your energy, your focus, or your joy, you are attracting it because you are tolerating it. Tolerance is silent approval. It is the invisible permission you give to mediocrity, to negativity, to distraction, to people who drain you in situations that diminish you. Tolerance is the seed of stagnation, the quiet thief of your potential, the reason most people never rise to the heights they dream about. Think about it for a moment. Every time you allow something that is beneath you to remain in your life, you are sending a message to yourself and the world. This is acceptable. Whether it's toxic people, bad habits, unproductive routines, limiting beliefs, or negative self-talk, when you tolerate it, you are aligning your life with it. And here's the harsh truth. Your results, your energy, your experiences, your relationships, all of it is a direct reflection of what you tolerate. You might say you want success, love, health, and happiness, but if your tolerance allows less than excellence, less than respect, less than growth, then your life will reflect exactly that. Your dreams cannot survive in an environment where your standards allow toxicity, laziness, and mediocrity to thrive. Let's break this down. Consider the people you spend the most time with. Are they lifting you higher or keeping you small? Are they aligned with your vision, your values, your potential? Or are they filling your mind with excuses, complaints, and limitations? Most people tolerate relationships that drain them emotionally, mentally, or financially, thinking that this is normal or just life. But tolerance is the slow poison of potential. Every day you spend with people who do not match your standards, who do not respect your time, who do not inspire your growth, you are training yourself to accept less than you deserve. You attract what you tolerate because tolerance communicates boundaries that are too weak, values that are negotiable, and identity that is flexible when it shouldn't be. Now, think about your habits. Habits are the daily reflection of what you tolerate from yourself. If you tolerate distraction over focus, laziness over effort, excuses over action, negativity over positivity, then your life reflects that tolerance in the results you get. People want change, but they are unwilling to stop tolerating the behaviors that have kept them stuck. They want abundance, but tolerate financial irresponsibility. They want health, but tolerate poor nutrition and inactivity. They want meaningful relationships, but tolerate dishonesty, inconsistency, and disrespect. The moment you stop tolerating behaviors that lower your identity, you begin to reshape your life. You begin to transform your world by transforming what you accept. Tolerance is not just about external factors, it's also about what you accept internally. How often do you tolerate negative self-talk, doubt, fear, and limiting beliefs? How often do you give permission to thoughts that undermine your confidence and your clarity? Every time you tolerate self-sabotage, you are reinforcing an identity that cannot sustain the life you desire. Eliminating what lowers your identity requires brutal honesty with yourself. It requires asking, what thoughts, beliefs, habits, and influences have I allowed to define me that do not serve my growth? What am I tolerating that keeps me stuck in mediocrity? What compromises have I made in my character, my discipline, my courage, my vision that need to end right now? The key to eliminating what lowers your identity is understanding your non-negotiables. Non-negotiables are the standards you enforce in your life that protect your growth, your focus, and your energy. Non-negotiables are the behaviors, attitudes, and actions that you will no longer accept from yourself or anyone else. They are the lines you draw in the sand, the rules that govern how you show up for your life. When you define your non-negotiables and refuse to tolerate anything that violates them, you raise your identity. You shift from being reactive to being intentional. You move from being a product of your environment to being the architect of your life. Let's consider the impact of this principle in action. Imagine someone who tolerates disrespect in their relationships. Maybe they stay in a friendship or a romantic partnership where their voice isn't valued, their time isn't respected, and their contributions aren't appreciated. What do they attract? More disrespect. Why? Because tolerance communicates weakness. Tolerance sends a message. It's okay to treat me this way. People, situations, and experiences respond to the identity you project, and if you project tolerance for disrespect, you will continue to attract it. The solution is simple yet often avoided. Eliminate it. Stop tolerating it. Refuse to accept it. When you eliminate what lowers your identity, you make room for relationships and experiences that elevate, inspire, and respect you. This principle applies to your environment as well. Your surroundings, your workspace, your home, your community, all of it reflects what you tolerate. If your environment is cluttered, chaotic, or uninspiring, your mind and your energy reflect it. If you tolerate disorganization, distraction, and stagnation in your physical space, your mental and emotional energy suffers the same fate. People who operate at high levels of achievement, influence, and fulfillment understand this principle intuitively. They surround themselves with energy, beauty, and clarity. They eliminate clutter. They eliminate negativity. They eliminate anything that lowers their identity because they understand that the world outside is a reflection of the world inside. Another critical area is your time. Time is your most precious resource, yet most people tolerate wasting it. They allow distractions, interruptions, and low-value activities to dominate their day. They tolerate saying yes to things that do not align with their purpose and no to things that do. Every moment spent tolerating what does not serve your identity is a moment spent reinforcing a life below your potential. Eliminating time-wasting activities, learning to say no without guilt, and protecting your schedule are acts of raising your standards and protecting your identity. Eliminating what lowers your identity also requires eliminating excuses. Excuses are tolerated by default. They are the invisible permission slip you give yourself to avoid action, responsibility, and growth. Excuses are comfort disguised as reason, procrastination disguised as strategy. The moment you refuse to tolerate excuses from yourself and from others, you reclaim control over your life. You attract opportunities, results, and people who match the identity you have elevated. And here's the most powerful part. Eliminating what lowers your identity is not punishment. It is liberation. It is freedom. Every toxic habit, negative belief, low-value relationship, and unproductive environment you remove creates space for higher energy, greater clarity, stronger habits, and more meaningful experiences. Every elimination is a step toward a life aligned with who you truly are, who you want to become, and the results you desire. You attract what you tolerate. And so if you want to attract excellence, abundance, respect, fulfillment, and growth, you must stop tolerating mediocrity, negativity, laziness, excuses, and disrespect. You must eliminate anything that lowers your identity, because identity is the magnet for your life experiences. Your standards, your boundaries, your non-negotiables, these are the filters through which opportunities, relationships, and experiences flow. Raise the standard of what you accept from yourself and others, and the world will respond accordingly. Your life is a reflection of what you tolerate. Your results, your experiences, and your energy are not accidents. They are the consequences of the invisible rules you have allowed to govern your existence. The question is simple. Are you willing to eliminate what lowers your identity and step into the life that matches your potential, your vision, and your value? When you make that decision, your life begins to shift. You stop attracting people, situations, and outcomes that diminish you. You start attracting the people, opportunities, and experiences that honor your worth, challenge your growth, and elevate your existence. You stop being reactive to circumstances and begin being intentional in the design of your life. You no longer settle. You no longer compromise. You no longer accept anything that lowers your identity. And the moment you do that consistently, daily, relentlessly, your life begins to rise to match the standard you enforce. Raising your standards starts with raising your self-worth. Everything you experience in life, every result you achieve, every relationship you nurture, every opportunity you attract is filtered through the lens of how you value yourself. Self-worth is not about arrogance, entitlement, or pretending to be better than anyone else. It is about knowing deep in your bones that you deserve more, that you are capable of more, that your life is meant to reflect the highest version of yourself. Without self-worth, even the loftiest goals, the most detailed plans, and the strongest intentions are powerless because the foundation that carries them, your identity, is weak. Raising your standards begins with raising your self-worth because it is impossible to demand excellence from life if you do not first demand excellence from yourself internally, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Think about it for a moment. How many people tolerate relationships, jobs, habits, or environments that are beneath them simply because they don't believe they are worthy of better? How many people settle for less love, less respect, less opportunity, and less fulfillment because deep down they have internalized a belief that they don't deserve more? Self-worth is the invisible force that determines the boundaries you set, the behaviors you accept, and the people and situations you allow into your life. If your self-worth is low, your standards follow. If your self-worth is high, your standards naturally rise. They are inseparable because standards are an outward reflection of inner value. Raising self-worth begins with awareness. Most people live their lives on autopilot, unaware of the ways they undermine themselves through thought, word, and action. They compare themselves to others and feel inadequate. They tolerate disrespect and disregard because they fear confrontation or rejection. They procrastinate, they rationalize, they blame, and they make excuses. Every one of these behaviors erodes self-worth, lowering the internal standard that governs everything else. To raise your self-worth, you must first see clearly the ways in which you have allowed yourself to settle. You must become brutally honest with the patterns, habits, and relationships that have diminished your sense of value, because awareness is the first step toward transformation. Once awareness is established, action becomes the catalyst. Raising self-worth is not theoretical, it is practical. It is demonstrated in the daily choices you make. Every time you refuse to tolerate disrespect, every time you choose to honor your commitments, every time you act with integrity, even when no one is watching, you reinforce your value. Every time you push past fear, every time you show up fully for yourself, every time you hold yourself accountable, you are raising your self-worth. It is not about perfection, it is about alignment. It is about being consistent in living according to a standard that reflects the highest version of yourself. Your self-worth also dictates the people you attract. People are drawn to energy, and energy is a reflection of self-value. When you honor yourself, when you refuse to tolerate less than you deserve, you naturally attract relationships, friendships, partnerships, and opportunities that mirror that energy. Conversely, when you undervalue yourself, you attract people and circumstances that reinforce your limitations. The world responds not to your intentions, but to the identity you carry. And self-worth is the core of that identity. Building self-worth requires eliminating comparison. Comparing yourself to others is a fast track to diminished value because it anchors your perception of yourself to external standards rather than internal truth. Your self-worth should not be determined by what others have, what others achieve, or how others behave. It should be determined by your commitment to your own growth, your discipline, and your alignment with your highest potential. When you focus on your own progress, when you honor your own journey, your self-worth rises, and with it, the standards you enforce in your life. Self-worth is also built through contribution. Every time you give value, help someone, create something meaningful, or impact lives positively, you reinforce your own sense of worth. Contribution is a mirror of identity. When you create value for others, you recognize your own value. This does not mean seeking validation externally. It means recognizing that the act of giving, of creating, of serving is proof of your significance and capability. The higher your contribution, the higher your self-worth becomes, and the higher your standards naturally rise to match it. Another critical aspect of self-worth is self-respect. Self-respect is the daily practice of honoring your boundaries, your values, and your principles. It is saying no to what diminishes you and yes to what elevates you. It is refusing to tolerate behaviors, situations, and people that do not align with your identity. It is enforcing a code of conduct with yourself that reflects who you are at your core. Every time you act with self-respect, your self-worth is reinforced. Every time you compromise it, your standards drop and your life mirrors that decline. Self-respect is the framework through which self-worth is translated into standards that shape results. Raising self-worth also requires confronting fear and embracing discomfort. Many people undervalue themselves because they fear failure, rejection, or judgment. They stay in familiar situations that keep them safe but limit their growth. They tolerate conditions and relationships that lower their identity rather than risking the discomfort of change. Yet growth and self-worth are forged in the moments when you step beyond comfort, confront fear, and choose courage over convenience. Every act of courage strengthens your self-worth, and every increase in self-worth raises the standard for what you will allow in your life. It is also essential to recognize the stories you tell yourself. The narrative you maintain about who you are, what you deserve, and what is possible for you shapes your self-worth. Negative, limiting, or false stories erode value, while empowering, truthful, and aspirational stories build it. Changing your self-worth begins with changing your story. Begin to tell yourself consistently that you are capable, deserving, resilient, and valuable. Begin to internalize the truth of your potential. This is not wishful thinking, it is intentional identity engineering. And as your self-worth grows, your standards rise in tandem. Consistency is key. Self-worth is not built in a single moment or a single victory. It is reinforced daily through repeated alignment with your values and your highest potential. Every decision, every action, every interaction is an opportunity to honor your worth. Every day you choose to act in ways that affirm your value, you raise the standard of who you are and what you will accept from life. Self-worth compounds over time, and the more it grows, the more your standards rise, shaping your destiny in ways you could never achieve through goals alone. Finally, raising your self-worth is the ultimate act of self-leadership. It is choosing to take control of your life, your energy, your environment, and your identity. It is refusing to let circumstances, people, or past failures dictate what is possible. It is understanding that the level of success, fulfillment, and happiness you experience will always be in proportion to the value assigned to yourself. When you raise your self-worth, you raise the bar for every aspect of your life. You stop tolerating what diminishes you, you stop compromising on your vision, and you begin to attract results, opportunities, and relationships that match the elevated standard you now enforce. Your self-worth is the foundation. Your standards are the reflection. The higher your self-worth, the higher your standards, and the greater the life you will attract. Everything begins with the decision to see yourself as valuable, capable, and deserving, and to act in ways that reinforce that truth consistently, relentlessly, and unapologetically. Your standards must be higher than your excuses, emotions, and old habits. This is a principle that separates those who achieve extraordinary results from those who drift through life hoping things will somehow work out. Too often, people let excuses dictate their decisions, emotions dictate their actions, and old habits dictate the trajectory of their lives. Excuses, feelings, and habits are not neutral. They are magnets for mediocrity. They pull you into patterns of complacency, stagnation, and limitation. Your standards, however, are the counterforce, the internal compass that guides you past excuses, above emotional turbulence, and beyond the gravitational pull of old habits. If your standards are not higher than these forces, they will dominate your life, and your potential will remain unfulfilled. Think about the role of excuses in your life. Excuses are comfortable lies we tell ourselves to justify inaction. They are the reasoning behind why we cannot start, why we cannot persist, and why we cannot reach the level we aspire to. I don't have time. I don't have the resources. I'm too tired. I'm not ready yet. Every excuse is a surrender of responsibility, a lowering of standards, and a silent agreement to settle for less than you are capable of. People who achieve extraordinary results do not live in the domain of excuses. They confront them, dismantle them, and refuse to allow excuses to dictate their choices. They understand that every excuse tolerated is a compromise on the quality of life they will experience. Raising your standards means refusing to let excuses determine your actions, your growth, or your destiny. Emotions are equally powerful. Too often, people allow how they feel in the moment to dictate their behavior. Motivation fluctuates, fear rises, doubt appears, and emotions swing like waves, tossing people off course. I don't feel like it becomes a justification for avoiding action, and over time, this emotional surrender becomes a habit itself. Yet life does not respond to feelings, it responds to actions. People who rise above mediocrity know that their standards must remain firm even when emotions are unstable, even when energy is low, even when circumstances are challenging. High standards require action independent of mood. They require doing what must be done when it must be done, regardless of temporary emotional states. It is through this discipline that emotions begin to align with identity, rather than identity being hijacked by emotions. Old habits are another invisible chain that binds potential. Habits are automatic responses that shape behavior without conscious thought. Some habits elevate and others diminish. Most people live in autopilot, unconsciously repeating patterns that no longer serve them or never served them in the first place. They eat poorly, procrastinate, complain, blame, overreact, or underperform simply because they have allowed old habits to dominate their behavior. Your standards must exceed these habits. They must be strong enough to interrupt the automatic responses that limit you, to demand new behavior, and to instill new patterns aligned with the life you aspire to lead. Without a standard higher than old habits, growth is impossible. Raising standards above excuses, emotions, and old habits is an act of self-mastery. It is the process of reclaiming control over your life, taking ownership of your decisions, and asserting the power of choice. Every time you act despite an excuse, you strengthen your identity. Every time you act despite negative or fluctuating emotions, you reinforce discipline. Every time you replace an old habit with a higher level habit, you create momentum that accelerates results. Standards are not abstract. They are lived through daily decisions. They are the force that transforms thought into action and action into outcomes. Let's examine how this works in practice. Imagine someone who has set a goal to build a business but consistently says, "I don't have time to work on it today." The excuse keeps them stuck. Their standards are low because they allow a temporary feeling, tiredness, distraction, discomfort, to dictate whether they act or not. If that person raises their standards, they no longer negotiate with excuses. They commit to consistent action, even when inconvenient, even when difficult. Their standards become the framework that ensures that excuses are no longer a roadblock, but a signal for growth and discipline. This is how ordinary intentions become extraordinary results. Emotions are a second battleground. Life is filled with unpredictable events that provoke fear, doubt, frustration, or discouragement. Most people react to these emotions with hesitation, withdrawal, or avoidance. Their standards are lower than the intensity of their feelings, so feelings dominate behavior. High achievers, however, understand that emotions are signals, not mandates. They choose standards that require action even when emotions resist. They act despite fear, doubt, or frustration. And in doing so, they train their emotions to follow their identity rather than control it. The higher your standard, the less power your emotions have over your outcomes. Old habits are perhaps the most insidious because they operate beneath awareness. They are automatic responses, often rooted in years of conditioning, and they can undermine intention faster than any excuse or emotional surge. Breaking old habits requires a standard that is persistent, non-negotiable, and aligned with your long-term goals. You must refuse to return to the default patterns that once defined you. You must enforce new habits that reflect the person you are becoming, not the person you were. Every time you choose the higher standard over an old habit, you reinforce identity, align behavior with goals, and create momentum toward transformation. Discipline is the bridge between standards and results. Standards without discipline are ineffective. Discipline without standards is blind effort. Standards define the quality of effort, the level of expectation, and the boundaries of behavior. Discipline enforces those standards consistently over time. Together, standards and discipline overcome excuses, regulate emotions, and replace old habits. They create the infrastructure of success, the architecture of identity, and the environment in which extraordinary outcomes become inevitable. The moment you recognize that excuses, emotions, and old habits are only as powerful as the standards you allow, you reclaim control. You understand that nothing external has the authority to dictate your results unless you allow it. Excuses are powerless when standards demand action. Emotions are manageable when standards require consistency. Old habits are replaceable when standards enforce alignment with identity. The higher the standard, the more resilient you become against the forces that seek to maintain mediocrity in your life. Raising standards above these internal and external forces is not a temporary adjustment. It is a permanent shift in identity. It is a decision that informs every choice, every action, and every reaction. You no longer negotiate with yourself over what you will or will not tolerate. You act according to the elevated standard you have set, regardless of discomfort, fear, doubt, or habit. This is how ordinary individuals evolve into extraordinary ones, how dreams translate into reality, and how potential becomes legacy. Your standards must be higher than your excuses, higher than your fluctuating emotions, higher than your old habits, because they are the foundation of transformation. They are the invisible rules that determine what you will accomplish, who you will become, and the life you will attract. Every choice to uphold a higher standard strengthens identity, shapes behavior, and attracts outcomes that match the elevated level you now enforce. Standards are stronger than excuses, emotions, and habits. Action becomes inevitable, growth becomes unstoppable, and results become inevitable. You step into a reality that no longer negotiates with your limitations, a reality that responds only to the level of standard you embody, and a life that mirrors the power of your unwavering commitment to excellence. Every breakthrough begins the moment you refuse to accept the old version of yourself. Change does not occur by accident, and transformation is never given freely. It is earned through a decision, a moment of clarity, a commitment to rise above what you have been, what you have tolerated, and who you have allowed yourself to be. Most people drift through life repeating patterns, living under limitations, and tolerating mediocrity because it is familiar, comfortable, and safe. Yet the life you are capable of, the results you desire, the fulfillment you crave, exist on the other side of refusal. Refusal to accept the outdated version of yourself that no longer serves your potential. Every significant achievement, every personal evolution, every success story has a pivotal moment where someone said, I am no longer willing to be who I was yesterday. That refusal is the catalyst for breakthroughs that reshape identity, redefine possibilities, and rewrite destiny. Think about it for a moment. The old version of yourself is composed of habits, fears, limiting beliefs, excuses, and compromises that you have tolerated over time. It is the accumulation of everything you have accepted as normal, behaviors, thought patterns, and routines that may have been convenient, but ultimately they keep you small. The old version of yourself is comfortable, but comfort is the enemy of growth. It whispers that what you have is enough, that the life you are living is acceptable, that ambition can wait. Transformation begins when you recognize that comfort has been the cage that has restricted your potential, and you refuse to remain inside it any longer. Refusing to accept the old version of yourself requires clarity. You must see without excuses or rationalization the ways in which your past behaviors, patterns, and decisions have kept you from the life you desire. This is not about blame, it is about awareness. It is about taking full responsibility for where you are and understanding that the only thing preventing you from becoming more, achieving more, and living more is the identity you have allowed yourself to embody up until now. Awareness without action is wasted potential. The breakthrough occurs when awareness meets the refusal to remain trapped in the old identity. Every breakthrough is also a decision of discipline. It is the conscious choice to act differently, to think differently, to behave differently, and to demand more from yourself than you ever have before. Discipline is the bridge between who you were and who you are becoming. It is easy to say, I will change, but far more difficult to act in ways that reinforce that change day after day. The old version of yourself has habits and routines embedded in your nervous system, and those habits will resist change. Excuses will arise, emotions will fluctuate, fear will appear. The breakthrough is the moment you commit to consistency despite resistance, to take action even when the old patterns beg you to revert. To show up as the person you are becoming, not the person you were. Rising above the old version of yourself also requires courage. It requires stepping into the unknown, leaving behind the familiar, and embracing discomfort. Change is inherently uncomfortable because it requires leaving behind identity, relationships, and patterns that, while limiting, are predictable. Most people avoid discomfort because they associate it with danger or failure, but the truth is, discomfort is the proving ground of transformation. Every step outside the old identity is a step toward a new life. And courage is the fuel that allows you to take that step consistently. The breakthrough occurs when courage outweighs comfort, and action trumps hesitation. Another essential element of refusing to accept the old version of yourself is self-belief. Change cannot occur without the internal conviction that you are capable of more, worthy of more, and resilient enough to sustain it. The old version of yourself doubts, hesitates, and limits. The new version of yourself says, I am capable, I am worthy, I am unstoppable. Belief is the lens through which action becomes effective and results become inevitable. Without belief, action is inconsistent, motivation is fleeting, and setbacks are devastating. Breakthroughs occur when belief eclipses doubt and fear, creating a foundation for relentless progress and transformation. Let's talk about habits. Habits are the compound effect of your identity. The old version of yourself is anchored in habits that reinforce limitation, procrastination, self-sabotage, distraction, inconsistency. Breakthroughs occur when you refuse to engage in these habits and intentionally replace them with habits that reflect the person you are becoming. Every small action repeated consistently rewires identity. Every habit aligned with your higher standards chips away at the old version of yourself. Every time you choose action over inaction, discipline over comfort, growth over stagnation, you reinforce the new identity. Transformation is the accumulation of these small, consistent, identity-driven choices. The old version of yourself is also reinforced by the people, environments, and influences you allow into your life. Relationships, social groups, and environments are powerful mirrors that can either support growth or reinforce limitation. Breakthrough requires a refusal to accept influences that keep you tethered to the old identity. It requires surrounding yourself with people who challenge you, elevate you, and reflect the standards of the person you are becoming. Every environment that does not align with your elevated identity must be addressed, changed, or removed. The breakthrough occurs when your social ecosystem begins to mirror your new identity, not your old one. Emotions play a critical role in maintaining the old identity. The old version of yourself reacts to fear, doubt, frustration, and discouragement, allowing feelings to dictate behavior. The breakthrough requires emotional mastery, the ability to act in alignment with your elevated standards regardless of fluctuating emotions. You do not wait to feel motivated, you take action that generates motivation. You do not wait to feel confident, you act in ways that build confidence. You do not allow temporary discomfort to dictate long-term potential. Emotional resilience is the force that allows you to consistently refuse the old version of yourself and align with a higher identity. Breakthrough is also tied to clarity of purpose. The old version of yourself drifts, reacts, and settles for mediocrity because there is no compelling vision to enforce standards. When you clarify why you want to change, what you are capable of, and the life you are committed to creating, every action becomes intentional. Every choice is filtered through a lens of alignment with your purpose. This clarity amplifies the refusal to accept the old version of yourself and drives consistent action toward transformation. Without purpose, standards falter and the old patterns regain control. Refusing to accept the old version of yourself requires patience. Transformation is rarely immediate. The old identity resists change. Old habits, thoughts, and beliefs fight to maintain the status quo. Breakthrough does not mean perfection, it means persistence. It means continuing to choose growth, alignment, and elevated standards day after day, moment after moment, despite setbacks and resistance. Every day you refuse to settle for the old you, you reinforce the new you. Every repeated action, every intentional choice, every courageous step compounds into significant transformation over time. Finally, the breakthrough begins with a declaration, a commitment to no longer settle for what you were. It is a choice to refuse the old patterns, the excuses, the fears, the limitations, and the mediocrity that once defined your life. It is a moment where awareness, courage, self-belief, discipline, purpose, and emotional resilience converge into action. Every step taken after that declaration reinforces the new identity, reshapes reality, and attracts opportunities, relationships, and experiences aligned with your elevated self. Transformation begins when you refuse to be who you were yesterday and choose to become the person capable of achieving the life you desire. Every breakthrough begins the moment you refuse to accept the old version of yourself, and the journey forward is shaped by the consistent enforcement of that refusal, the deliberate creation of new habits, the cultivation of emotional resilience, the alignment of purpose, and the courage to act beyond fear, doubt, and comfort.